Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started now. Welcome again, everyone, to the Microsoft 365 Copilot for Oil and Gas and Energy webinar. We're really excited and pleased and honored that you have joined us today. We have a great panel of experts to talk about the hot topic of Copilot and AI that's so critical for a lot of these business environments nowadays. So we're going to discuss how to integrate Copilot into your business from the start of the journey through the implementation process, and then finally adoption. So again, thanks for attending. A little bit about the team here. My name is Chris Heffernan. I'm responsible for the oil, gas, and energy vertical here. I'm the client partner for the vertical. And I typically cover the Azure, application innovation, data and AI, and security aspects of the consulting business. We also have Naeem Mohammed, who's our security consultant, and really talk about one of the most important things of Copilot, and that's everybody's concern about security. And then Andy Lee will talk about adoption change management, and Bill will put a bow on it at the end, and how to integrate that content with the AI agent. Just a little bit, each of them will introduce themselves as we move forward in the presentation here, but just a little bit about myself. Been with Valorem Reply for a short period of time, but I'm not new to the oil and gas and energy space. I've been an enterprise account executive, sold oil and gas software for 15 plus years. I like to use the plus there so it doesn't age me, but just so you know, I've been doing it a little while now. So excited to have you. A little bit about the agenda. We're talking about the role of AI, or I will, in M365 and Copilot for oil, gas, and energy. Then we'll segue into the critical first step of addressing any kind of Copilot implementation would be the security and protection. And then we'll go into strategies for driving the adoption, and then extending Copilot with your customs agents. And then we'll have some closing remarks and Q&A. Just getting started here, please put your lines on mute. I think everyone is. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so be sure to put them in the Q&A section. We're eager to help answer any kind of questions you have. We love reactions, so any kind of reactions you can give us, good, bad, or indifferent, we would like to see them. There you go. Thank you so much. This meeting will be recorded, and so you'll be able to have it at the end of the presentation. So who is Valorem Reply? Valorem Reply is a part of a larger decentralized network of 13 different sister companies, or spokes, if you will. Some of our other companies in the United States represent different technology stacks or different consulting services, from SAP to AWS to managed consulting services. But Valorem Reply is specifically focused in on the Microsoft tech stack. Typically, the areas that we cover are, like I said, is the app innovation, infrastructure, data and AI, which covers your data fabric and your data bricks, and then security as well, and modern work and business applications. For the purposes of this meeting, we have two groups represented. I come from the Azure side of the house, where Annie and Bill typically are focused in on the modern work perspective. But we all work together as a team and have some overlap at some points in time. But the really important key here is that we cover the full gamut of the Microsoft product set. Some of our work within the oil, gas, and energy space. This is just an example of a couple of the companies that we've worked with. We've done a lot of change management with Itron. We've worked from Copilot implementations on Marathon to infrastructure and governance with Peabody, just to name a few. But as you can see, we have a lot of different representation from the oil and gas space, some big names on there. Like I said, this is just a sampling of some of the ones that we've done business with. This list continues to grow rapidly at this point. So a little bit about the role of AI and M365 Copilot in the OG&E space. But before we do that, it's important to kind of give you an idea of what Copilot is all about. There's different versions or flavors of Copilot, as we like to say. You're probably familiar with the personal Copilot that we all have and use on a daily basis, I think, through Bing. And then we have the Copilot chat, which adds a little bit more protection, security protections or data protection layer. And then what we'll be focused in on today is the M365, which actually has the data protection, the security compliance initiatives, as well as graphs and the Microsoft 365 apps. And then there's another Copilot that's specifically developed for sales, service, and finance that goes into your Dynamics 365, your Salesforce, ServiceNow, or SAP. So this is an important chart. So what are the deliverables here? There's really three main silos, if you will. And there's this is where you're going to start to realize your ROI with anything that you do in your company or business. And we call them the broken meeting, the information labyrinth, and the blank page. And as you can see here from the broken meeting standpoint, about having productive meetings as an example. This meeting is being transcribed right now, so you can actually get a good feel of what's happened in the course of the meeting. With AI, it's actually going to give you a nice recap as well, and then even follow-up tasks to do. So this is great. And in fact, if you're late to a meeting, or maybe the speaker is talking too fast and not being able to take great notes, AI can really, really help you. I always refer to this as having the Cliff Notes of AI. I may age myself by using Cliff Notes. I don't know if they're still out there, but I certainly used them in college. But it's a great way to get this information in an expedited way. And then, of course, the information labyrinth that we all go through. There's just a ton of data sprawl and information sprawl on the internet. And the Copilot and AI allows you to go in and be able to quickly search for something and get that information quickly and improve your efficiency, productivity, and time management. And I'm amazed that it's 8.8 hours per week that people spend on trying to look for documentation. So there's a tremendous amount of ROI with that information labyrinth. And then, of course, the blank page. I think a lot of us may use this. I certainly do. But I think we always struggle to get our creative juices flowing at some points. And by nudging Copilot, we can find out specific things. Maybe you want to craft an email or learn how to run a project more effectively, and try to dig from that perspective. From my perspective, I use this a lot for developing strategic account plans for my customers to find out what their initiatives are, what their direction is. So it's just a really great tool for getting across the roadblocks with creative challenges that you may have. And it also improves your productivity. I'd like to act like I'm a creative genius, but Copilot makes me look like one a lot of times by using those features. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Naeem. He's going to talk a little bit about the security. It's probably the most important topic that everyone wants to address. And Naeem, I'm going to let you have it from here.
Alrighty then. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. And welcome everyone to Security for Copilot. And when we get started in our discussion about security for Copilot, it's important that we keep three key areas in mind. And today we'll go deep into these three key areas. And those three key areas are data oversharing. And data oversharing potentially could result in a loss of trust with customers if it's not addressed. Data loss could result in the less competitive edge if you lose that proprietary material. And then, of course, with data non-compliance, that could come with heavy penalties if we are not meeting those auditory and those compliance regulations. So we want to make sure that we're on top of those. Let's start off with oversharing risks today. For our oversharing risk, it's important to remember that Copilot provides only access to certain files needed for that individual. So what exactly is oversharing? Oversharing occurs when an individual, for example, has access to more things than what's required for their job role. And what really causes oversharing within the organization? Well, that happens often accidentally sometimes. If a user saves sensitive files to an open SharePoint site without realizing everyone's on it. It could happen when people share files far too broadly, for example, using like an everyone in the organization link just to share something out that maybe not everyone needs. or it could happen if files lack the protections that follow them, regardless of location. So they may not have certain access protections in place that we may have assumed were there, but they weren't. Let's go through a quick scenario, for example. Potentially overshared files and sites, oftentimes they have similar attributes. Sites and files with sensitive data, they can be in areas where oftentimes you have a lot of traffic with employees and with a lot of people coming to a certain SharePoint site or accessing a certain file. Data that's shared broadly and data that's accessed frequently. That tells us, oh, okay, this may be a potentially overshared file or site, and this is something we should look into. A quick example is a site that contains documents with credit card numbers. We know that this has highly sensitive information. And then, oh, we also see that everyone in the organization can access this site's content. Oh, well, now we know it has a high level of access, and a lot of people are coming here. And we see over 500 people have actually accessed this site content in the last week. Oh, goodness. So this is telling us not only is this sensitive information, but it's also sensitive information that is being accessed rapidly. This is a very, very high risk activity, and this is something that needs to be remediated fairly quickly. Going forward, when it comes to preparing for oversharing before it occurs, we want to restrict user or Copilot access to these risky sites while remediating the existing oversharing risks that we have. We also want to act on our policy suggestions to mitigate oversharing risks. There may already be security policies active within your organization that maybe just aren't being put into practice within Copilot or within documents associated with Copilot. So you want to make sure those strategies align with one another. Additionally, we want to prevent Copilot from processing certain sensitive files and from using them in responses if required, and remove that organization-wide site access where needed. Not everything needs to be organization-wide. Additionally, when it comes to finding new oversharing risks, we want to get notifications when oversharing occurs, and have those, and we want to have that option for remediation right then and there so that we can address it quickly. We want to further secure our sensitive data through file level access, being intentional about, oh, does so-and-so need this file? Does this job group require this information? Do they need access to this type of data? And thus, should Copilot have access to this type of data? And again, we can improve Copilot responses by archiving and deleting unneeded content. So some files, some sensitive information may just not be needed anymore. It may not need to be retained. In that case, we simply want to get rid of it. So it's not an issue with Copilot at all. Next, we can address insider risk. And oftentimes, insider risk is the hardest to get across because people are just like, well, usually in security, the risk is on the outside of the business. It's on the outside of the organization. We're worried about some attacker coming in. But oftentimes we forget that shadow IT and sometimes misusing information inadvertently can cause a risk within the organization, and we need to be aware of that. So what exactly is data loss and insider risk? Well, data loss and insider risk may occur without any Copilot use at all, and the productivity benefits of Copilot creates opportunities, very easy opportunities for a user to overstep their bounds and potentially access information that they maybe shouldn't. Data loss specifically is when unsafe or inappropriate sharing or transfer or use of sensitive content occurs. So this is when something sensitive is shared, and it is, in that case, it is lost from that sensitive group that only should have access to that information. Insider risk specifically involves users misusing their authorized access to cause harm and to actually try and find sensitive information that they know they should not have access to. And what causes data loss and insider risk? Well, Copilot can create documents that aren't protected. If someone creates a document via Copilot, maybe the inputs that are used to create that document weren't protected. So by default, Copilot doesn't protect those documents. Using Copilot to access or summarize already existing sensitive information is a very easy avenue. Additionally, users' credentials can be easily compromised via some phishing attack, for example, or some unauthorized third party. An employee that may have resigned, and this is something we often have to address, an employee that may have resigned or may have a date in mind for when they want to leave the organization may quickly try and exfiltrate a lot of data at the end and try and put it on a jump drive or something. And that can, of course, be a data loss risk as well. I'm going through just some quick examples of what we can do to help remediate these things. Viewing reports of sensitive data and unprotected files, for example, referenced in Copilot interactions, can help provide us with this context just to see what exactly is going on in Copilot. Why exactly, who exactly is accessing what information via Copilot. You can receive alerts of risky AI usage, such as an attempted prompt injection attack. You can also view prompt and response text and reference files and see exactly what are people pulling out of Copilot? What are they using? What are they accessing? Additionally, in a scenario I like to go through here, for example, is when it comes to data labeling and applying sensitivity labels. We oftentimes have documents that are associated with maybe C-suite or maybe a specific group of users that we don't want to get in access, we don't want to have access to via another third party or via some employees. So what we can do is label this information ahead of time, denote it as sensitive. In this way, Copilot knows better, and they know, for example, not to give this information over. And we can see in this example Copilot interaction, here someone is asking for the summary of a merger document. Without our sensitivity labels, that merger document is just open and free and clear, and Copilot's like, here you go. However, when we do implement those sensitivity labels and we put on those protections on this document, Copilot basically says, well, it shows you the hand. It says, no, 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 you don't have access to this. What do you think you're doing? It tells you, no, you're not going to get a summary of this document. And that's the behavior that we want. We want our documents and our files properly labeled so that we don't have those data leaks. Additionally, once certain protections are active in your environment via Purview, and once those analytics are taking place, we can determine a baseline and see exactly what users tend to do in your environment. How do they tend to share files with one another? What is typical usage behavior for your organization? Once Microsoft and Purview learns that behavior, it can establish a baseline and then find outliers. Once we see someone who's pilfering, 300, 400 files, we can look there and be like, something's not quite right about that. And we can single that individual out, and that can lead to further remediation. Lastly, let's discuss AI governance. AI governance is, of course, exceedingly important as governance supports Copilot usage and it ensures that Copilot usage is safe, is in alignment with certain regulatory regulations, and ensure that it ensures that audits go well, of course. Um, Policies are exceedingly important within the organization. It is important that we ensure that those policies extend to the governance of Copilot itself. Governance is enforced by a set of compliance and management controls for the safe and effective use of Copilot. And it includes the option to include Copilot interactions in your existing compliance, management, and legal processes alongside other types of Microsoft 365 content. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to compliance for Copilot. And using your existing policies, using your existing regulations, using your existing setup, we can then integrate Copilot right into that already existing platform, already existing policy, and not start over from the beginning. I'm sure I don't need to exactly explain why we need governance. Aligning with certain regulations is, of course, important. Certain governments and certain regulations require that you hold a certain standard when it comes to data retention, when it comes to certain security controls, and Copilot is no different. There's no exception, and it also must align with those standards. So a few examples as to how we can keep an eye on Copilot governance. Auditing, for example, Copilot Word audits. Copilot audits allows us to pull out date, time, user information, and detailed event data when Copilot, for example, has a chat. This allows us to pull out specifically what's going on and to just gain insight so that we can perform these audits. We can decide to retain information for a certain set amount of time and then delete after a certain amount of time. So certain retention policies may require that you keep data for a month to a month and a half, and we can actually implement that right within our controls here. We can also include a user's Copilot prompts and responses in a legal hold if that's a requirement for legal. And lastly, we can decide here to align Copilot with a specific compliance standard or regulatory act. There are quite a few built-in compliance standards and regulatory acts in Microsoft's purview. For example, you'll find quite a few of them are even enhanced and provide you with additional control beyond just the basics. Additionally, you can perform admin searches to take a look at specifically what's going on across a broad number of users within the organization. And you can also receive an alert again if something outside of the norm or something outside of what's allowed within a certain standard occurs. You can then take a look at that alert, decide whether or not to remediate it, or maybe align the standard to best meet a new need. For example, if users, for example, need to do something that maybe say for example is outside of the norm. All right, then I'll go ahead here and pass it on over to Annie.
Thank you, Naeem, for just that overview of really some of the key pillars for securing a technical environment for Microsoft 365 Copilot. As we really move from having a secure foundation for generative AI, we also want to be thinking about how do we actually bring Copilot into the hands of our employees, into the hands of the end users, and make it valuable and impactful for them. So that's what I'll be talking about really for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And again, thanks so much for joining us here today. Myself, my name is Annie Lee, and I lead our adoption change management practice at Valorem Reply as part of the modern work business. And again, I'm really excited to be here and to be talking about adoption for Copilot specifically. So let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, what is adoption change management? It's something that you might have heard of before, but in case you haven't, let's start with some of the core foundations here. So adoption change management, or ACM, really lies at the intersection of people, process, and technology. And it's all about bridging the gap between what my current state is as an employee at my organization and what that future state is in terms of the digital tools that I'm using day in, day out, and what I'm getting from them. So adoption change management really focuses on the people side of the change. With every digital transformation, and just the same with Copilot, there is the technical component in which we are enabling people with licenses for Copilot. But what about the people side? We have to recognize that in order for an organization to change and adopt something new like generative AI, individual mindsets and behaviors have to change first. And that's what adoption change management is really all about. Why is adoption change management unique for tools like Copilot? Well, there are a couple of things that make Copilot different than really any other digital tool that has been rolled out in the past. I'm sure we all have this feeling that we are on the precipice and really being a part of something completely new and transformational. And honestly, that's why there are some barriers to adoption from the beginning with Copilot. So first and foremost, it's a new technology, especially when we think about the generations that are represented in an organization. Not everyone has interfaced with a tool like Copilot, where you are essentially chatting to this generative AI large language model. Not everyone has had this experience, and thus the fact that it's a completely new platform and a way of working is a hurdle to consider. In addition, Copilot really brings very individual and unique user experiences. If you're a user of Copilot, you might have already seen this in action, in the sense that if you were to run the same prompt or request to Copilot twice, you might not always get the exact same response. And of course, then between individuals that are running different types of activities with Copilot, those responses are different as well. So it's just a whole new, almost living and breathing way of interacting with technology, which is very different for many individuals. It's ever changing. As we know, Copilot is always evolving and always adding in new functionalities into its tool belt, but that can also, have a flip side and a challenge where there's a lot of new technology to learn, and there's a lot more that is kind of continuing to quicken the pace of how Copilot works. And just as we feel sometimes that we've got a hold on the latest and greatest components of it, it might change and it might add something new into the fold. So that rapid and frequent rate of change is something to consider as well. And these last two here, first and foremost, technical abstraction. Again, it's this notion that generative AI in general and the use of large language models, it's not really something that a lot of people feel concrete or feel is very concrete in their minds, or it's something that they can really touch and experience as with other digital tools. And so that notion that it's so different and we don't exactly know how all of it works, sometimes that can be a challenge. And lastly, the productivity proof dilemma. We hear a lot about, AI in the news every day and have for years. And sometimes people feel that, okay, if I've got Copilot, I am able to work a lot more efficiently and really have these moments of boosted productivity. But what does that mean for my job? And am I going to have to create a lot more output and have more responsibility just because Copilot is here to help me be more productive? So there are a couple of things around this really that we have to unpack when we're considering where people might be starting from in terms of their mindset and approach to Copilot. So organizations have a lot of focus areas and things to consider in order to drive adoption. The first of that is messaging. It always begins with communications and awareness. And when we think about messaging, it's all about how we as leaders within an organization can shape really the narrative. How does the organization feel about AI tools, and how can I mold that in order to really promote a positive mindset and view of a tool like Copilot when I'm launching it? From a user adoption perspective, how do I prepare employees to actually use Copilot successfully? And not even just preparing employees to do so, how can we drive that adoption and support and reinforce adoption? Sustaining innovation. One thing we just talked about was the notion that Copilot is ever changing. And how do we match that pace of Microsoft and Copilot by allowing users to tap into those latest functionalities, keeping everyone aware, and supporting actually kind of boots on the ground innovation from the ground up? And just as well, with any tool that we implement, we realize that we have to be thinking about the ROI. We all know that Microsoft 365, Copilot is not free. And so what can we do to ensure that we are measuring and quantifying the value that Copilot brings to the organization? That's a key component when we think about adoption. What's our answer to some of these questions? Well, our answer really is an approach that is founded in the ProSci ADKAR methodology for change management. And really what that means is focusing on awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement as we are going through that change. When we think about this in the context of Copilot, a couple of key pillars. So starting off with focusing on driving awareness and desire around Copilot, we have to create a comprehensive communications and training campaign. We have to be able to, as I mentioned previously, manage the message around generative AI and build excitement. Give people a reason to be interested and to be excited about having a Copilot license. As we build that excitement and we show a little bit of what Copilot can do for the employees themselves, it's about giving them the skills through training, and again, we'll talk more about this shortly, to actually be able to get the value of Copilot themselves at the individual level. And as we're doing this, it's important to create a space for people to collaborate, cross-pollinate knowledge, and essentially have a community to be able to talk about Copilot, share successes and challenges, and more. In addition to this, some of the people that are going to be key contributors to the journey and to that community are what we might call Copilot champions, or people that are part of a champions network focused around Copilot and digital M365 tools. We'll talk more shortly about what champions are and really what their role is in Copilot implementations, but we're looking for really that passionate and influential group of technology adopters who are willing to have an extra role and really shape how the organization approaches Copilot. And beyond that, again, focusing on measuring ongoing success. So planning ahead and thinking about what are the core quantitative and qualitative metrics that we want to be looking at and measuring and keeping track of as we go through an implementation process, and leveraging your champions to help you in that journey by helping to identify valuable use cases for Copilot across roles and areas of the business, and then being able to bring all of that together, high value areas of Copilot usage, as well as the qualitative and quantitative data, and being able to build a business case from that. So we've got a couple of key pillars here to inform our adoption change management strategy, and let's go ahead and talk about each one of them in tandem. Starting off with creating a communications and training campaign, our really first pillar that helps set users up for success. When we think about talking about Copilot within the organization, again, we want to be able to manage that message, but also drive excitement. We want to be sharing what we like to call the art of the possible. Oftentimes, when a Copilot license lands in your lap, you might not necessarily know how to get started beyond using it for simply, just quick question and answer types of use cases. But there's so much more to dive into. And so it's important to showcase the art of the possible, just as Chris was mentioning earlier, of how Copilot can transform your working day through resolving the broken meeting, helping you find information, and helping you get past that blank page syndrome that we sometimes have when we are working on content for our daily jobs. We want to focus on demonstrating the value that AI and Copilot can have from the beginning, and we want to let people know how to get started, how to access it, and where to find it. But at the same time, we also have to be thinking about the anxieties that naturally come with using generative AI, as we spoke about just previously. There are myths that float around AI, the notion that it's so efficient that it's going to replace your job, or the notion that it's just going to do your job for you, or that Copilot is always correct. All of these are myths, and it's important to recognize these anxieties and fears and bust them through an accurate and really cohesive communications campaign, focusing on the fact that it's going to fundamentally change the way you work, but it's really here to help you as an individual take that work to the next level and achieve greater productivity. And of course, again, we want to set realistic expectations of use. How many sessions have I been in with employees across organizations where they are really hoping that Copilot is going to do a whole end-to-end process for them across multiple applications and multiple documents through one prompt? We have to really take away that expectation that Copilot can do our jobs for us, and we want to have it really be framed as being our personal assistant, helping us get through some of those mundane tasks and open up areas of creativity, but not being able to actually do those end-to-end processes and execute that analytical thinking that we are here for as the humans in the room. So again, it's about managing the message, driving excitement, but also assuaging some of those fears and making sure that we are thinking about Copilot in a realistic way. As we think about the training and knowledge sharing side really of this initial pillar, we want to be thinking about cultivating knowledge and really meeting people where they like to learn. Every individual is different. When we think about adult learning, we might need to have messages and assets around Copilot in 7 different formats in order for it to really sink in and feel like it's integrated into daily work. So we need to create options for self-service learning, things that can be, quickly digested, digital assets, quick learning videos that might be housed in a sustainable SharePoint site, for example. But we also need to be thinking about continuous learning, both in an instructor-led format or maybe in a support kind of hands-on office hours format. We need to think of all of those different avenues that people like to learn via. We want to be thinking as well about kind of 2 sides of the same coin when it comes to training. We need to train for Copilot as a tool so that people understand the basics of how you access Copilot, how to use it inside of Microsoft Teams, Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, and so on. But then also taking that to the next level, once they have those basics, we need to be thinking about the actual ways that Copilot can be used for their specific role and begin to train for those use cases so that people actually have a true understanding of how Copilot can up-level their work in the daily tasks that they experience as an individual. As I mentioned earlier, it's also important to create that space, that community, for people to share knowledge and for people to ask questions. And that often is accomplished in a space like Viva Engage or Microsoft Teams, for example. And as we go through the process, again, we'll be talking about measuring success and ROI, but it's important to gather feedback along the way. And there are individuals such as champions who can help to give us that feedback and again, help us iterate. We are always here from an adoption change management perspective to iterate on the plan and really find what works most effectively in order to reach the employee base that we are targeting. So again, focusing on communications and training to get us started. And again, as we mentioned, who are those folks that are boots on the ground that can give us that feedback and help steer the direction of our implementation? It's our Copilot champions. You might have heard before of this notion of a change network or a champions network. And really what that means is it's a group of connected and influential and also representative, which is really important, individuals within an organization who are able to promote and really support the adoption of a technology such as Copilot. They are people that essentially represent every slice of the organization and can really speak to and advocate for adoption, again, whether that's for Copilot or even any other technology or initiative. Your change champions and change network participants are likely early adopters of technology, even including things like Copilot in and of itself. They're people who are naturally curious, hungry for what's next, and interested really in how AI can shape their work. And essentially, when it comes to working with your champions, they are liaisons. They are the voice to the people and from the people, working in that bi-directional way to help project and implementation teams understand what the feelings, sentiment, and usage of Copilot is from your actual employees, and then relaying that back to the implementation team so that, again, we're getting that feedback. At the same time, they're an avenue for the implementation team to actually be able to push messages, share accurate information, and more. So this group is so critical to driving adoption, and we've really had a lot of success working with customers that we're able to help shape the strategy for the champions, and we're able to help engage the champions themselves on a regular basis to drive that success. And when we work directly with champions, there's a couple of different roles that it's important to be aware of, and we have to share these types of expectations with our champions. And in doing so, we can incentivize being a champion while also creating essentially a supporting arm that helps to extend your implementation team. So when we work with champions, we need to first actually get in front of them and kind of give them that sneak peek into what's coming with Copilot and why it's important. We need to make sure that they, as our champions, understand the need for the change and they are excited about it. That then empowers them to communicate about the change with resources that we as an implementation team would help provide to them. From there, they really begin to, again, be that extension of the implementation team. They're here to engage, they're here to support, and they're here to act as a role model to other Copilot users, kind of being at that forefront of innovation and being there to answer one another's questions and promote the tool. Again, as we mentioned, they're here also to give us the inside scoop a little bit, to monitor the progress of adoption across their team, to help identify and escalate any challenges or pain points that Copilot users might be having, and also actually supporting proactively in the resolution of those challenges. And holistically together, through that, we're able to maintain a strong network, engaging with them frequently, giving resources, sharing feedback, and that creates a really beautiful cycle of support, really, for your implementation team. So that's really what we're aiming for with our change champions, and they really can be the difference between a successful adoption with really, really great qualitative and quantitative feedback from the users themselves around the tool versus a program where people are still kind of just scratching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Copilot. Champions are key, and really being proactive in getting that boots on the ground support is important as we consider the adoption change management framework for Copilot. And lastly, let's touch on measuring success. This factor is sometimes overlooked, but it's really critical actually to provide the onset for measuring success at the beginning of an implementation. That way, by the time we get towards the end of maybe a pilot or even, a monthly or quarterly review of Copilot usage through an implementation, we will have something to compare to, and we'll have a baseline that makes sense for the organization. A couple of goals and metrics that are often mentioned when it comes to Copilot usage can be found here. Things like the number of active users every month, the frequency of usage, and for example, how many prompts are being run with Copilot and in what areas. That's the kind of information that Microsoft gives to us as users of Copilot. The time saved, that can be measured through dashboard activities, but it's also really great to hear it directly from the actual users themselves. How much time do we think Copilot is saving you on a daily or weekly basis? Quality of output, is it improving actually the output that you create and your productivity in doing so? And satisfaction, classic net promoter score. Would you recommend Copilot to a colleague? In order to help us get at these metrics, we've got a couple of tools up our sleeves. So we can think about analyzing sentiment, how people feel and use Copilot from their perspective through things like surveys, focus groups, and interviews. We've got the Copilot dashboard and Viva Insights as well, which Microsoft provides to those who have over 50 licenses of Microsoft 365 Copilot. And this dashboard really allows us to get a deeper dive into the metrics around usage from a tool perspective. And we have something that we like to call A/B user testing. Similar kind of to the UI UX concept, we're thinking about how we can understand the extra value that Copilot gives when it's being used versus when it's not. And holistically, these three types of measurement tools allow us to understand things like how the tool is being used, how it's being perceived, how frequently people are using it, and what kind of impact it's driving. So in conclusion, what are really some of the key components of a successful Copilot rollout? It's all about starting with the messaging, right? So managing the perception of Copilot and AI overall in the workforce from a cultural perspective. Then thinking about the key processes and high value use cases where Copilot is likely to make a really strong impact. And then actually training not only for the tool, but for those high value use cases so that people have that firm understanding of how Copilot can boost their own productivity. Engaging champions to advocate for Copilot, spread the word on how best to use the tool, and support the project implementation team in the execution of a campaign. And comprehensively and regularly, key point there, measuring impact and ROI. And altogether, these components really allow us to create a business case to leadership and throughout the business that outlines the value of Copilot, the value it's driven thus far, the lessons learned and successes, and really where an organization can go next to expand usage of Copilot, get more value out of it, and more. And so that's adoption change management for Copilot in a nutshell. And with that, I'm excited to toss it over to my dear colleague, Bill Feldker, who's going to talk through how you really expand the usage of Copilot and drive its value with agents. Bill, over to you.
Thank you, Annie. Looking forward, we're going to talk a little bit about extending Copilot with custom agents. But I'm Bill Felker. I'm a senior manager on the Valorem Reply team, focusing on all those Microsoft 365 technologies. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk a little bit about supercharging Copilot for your business. We've talked about today, we bring Copilot, in for things like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and using it within your SharePoint, OneDrive, and Mailbox. However, all that we know that a lot of our key information actually resides outside of the Microsoft environment. So originally, obviously Copilot can't access that information. So how do you do that? How do you bring that data in to your Copilot system? So when we talk about that integration with the users and trying to bring that organization-wide efficiencies, that's what extending Copilot is. So when we talk about extensibility, it's basically a broad term for bringing, those methods where we're empowering Copilot to interact securely with information outside of Microsoft 365. When we do this, we call those facilities agents. So we're bringing agents into the fold. So when we look at this graph below here, we talk about, skills being on the y-axis, knowledge on the x-axis. You have your large language models, and then you have Microsoft 365 Copilot. What Copilot agents do is they expand and enhance that knowledge that's already there, and then they can also enhance the skills that are being added in. So when we talk about the different types of agents, we talk about two really focused different types. Declarative Copilot agents, they're basically customized Microsoft 365 Copilots tailored to very specific needs. They can integrate seamlessly with plugins, graph connectors, and they can provide a secure, consistent user experience within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Sometimes that isn't enough, and we have to go a little bit further and build a custom agent or enterprise conversational agents built on custom foundational models. These agents offer greater flexibility and independence, allowing for highly specialized AI solutions tailored to unique organizational requirements. Now that we've seen what those two flavors are, we might dig a little deeper into each one and what you need to work with. And one of the biggest questions is, well, how do I know which one to use? So let's start at the top. First of all, do we want to extend, Microsoft Copilot's model, or do we want to bring our own model in? If you want to use Copilot's, models that already exist, we're talking about doing some more of those declarative agents. And so we want to extend it. We want to use custom connectors to ingest other data, or we use plugins to call different services outside of Copilot's availability at the beginning. Or do we want to go a little bit further and say, hey, I want to use my own model, choose my own choices on the models? That we might have to build a custom agent. And so when we look at the different tool bases for these, we're thinking about Copilot Studio being used across both, where it's a no code or low code option. But sometimes we need to go a little bit further and we need to use Azure OpenAI to bring in our own models and our own choices. So we've mentioned connectors a couple different times. What is a graph connector? So basically we're talking about accessing enterprise knowledge from those third-party systems and sources. Whether it's an on-prem or in the cloud, we can use those as to further our knowledge within the Copilot arena. So we can ingest that content into the Microsoft Graph. This is basically just brings it right into that Copilot grounding layer, and we can use it right away. We can discover content across Copilot, whether it's using Copilot, Microsoft Search, or even other Microsoft 365 apps. But all this, knowing that it's being protected by the same security and compliance policies that Naeem talked about earlier, and control all of your Microsoft 365 data. We've also mentioned plugins a couple of different times, and when we look at that, we talk about more about what actions are. So we can connect a Copilot to third-party applications. We can actually retrieve that data real time, business data that's important. And then we can assist users with actions using rich, customizable adaptive cards. You can see a couple of cards down below. And the best part about this is we can reuse those existing investments from the Microsoft ecosystem, or we can build new ones if we need to. So when we look at this, Copilot extensibility, going from the lowest no code end to the pro code end, we saw what is that extensibility spectrum. So when we talk about no code, we're talking about adopting those connectors, those out of the box connectors where we can bring just data in without any additional work, just turning it on. Whereas as we move up that scale a little bit, we talk about using a low code solution. So we're thinking about introducing Copilot Studio. How can we extend Copilot with that Copilot Studio? Thinking about whether, we're adding some customizations, trying to focus people to be able to click a button to answer questions, those types of solutions. But sometimes we need to go a little bit deeper. And when we do that, we have to talk about bringing in Azure AI Studio to bring in some of those pro code solutions into our Copilot as we're working through that. So let's jump a little bit into agents and understand exactly what agents are. So what are Copilot agents and how do they work? So agents are basically AI assistants that can help you optimize business processes. They can help you enhance productivity across all areas of your business. And they're available in a wide array of capabilities, tools, levels of complexity, depending on what you need. So there are a few types of agents, and we'll talk about this across the complexity level, going from simple to advanced. A simple agent can just be a retrieval agent, where it's just retrieving information from data that's already grounded into your M365. It can reason over that data, summarize, answer questions, just like Copilot, but now we're bringing in external sources. If we start to move forward along this complexity scale, we can have it to take actions when things are asked. We can run automated workflows. We can replace repetitive tasks for users, where we're actually doing things for them. And again, these are all available today. When we talk about the most advanced type of agent, we're talking about autonomous agents. They operate independently. They can dynamically plan, orchestrate. They can actually call other agents, and they can learn and escalate as needed. There are countless ways to optimize and reinvent your business processes with Copilot agents. I'm sure many of you already have business processes in line today, but instead think about how we can actually change those using Copilot. So thinking about that, we can transform those complex dynamic processes that you have today. We can handle those variable situations in real time using judgment to plan their next steps and perform specialized tasks required to complete jobs. They can reimagine the possibilities with multi-agent collaboration. So agents can actually call and collaborate with other agents or other users. We can reach out to users too, using tasks and different ways to do that. They can also enable every employee to augment their jobs with agents. So using natural language, any employee can empower to design and operate their own agents today. So let's talk a little bit of an example of what an agent might look like. So you'll see a little screen going on, kind of self-walking through it, but an employee self-service agent might answer common workplace-related policy questions, HR questions, or even IT tasks to improve resolution times. So we can connect the employees to answer official questions from internal knowledge bases, so thinking about SharePoint sites. We can also get answers from the HRIT data from external systems as needed, whether it's from Workday, SAP, ServiceNow, those types of solutions. And then we can create pre-built workflows around the common topics like benefits in IT, help desk, and Copilot. It can even answer real questions like, what is the parental leave policy with our organization? And then while it's asking that question, would you like to apply for that leave? And you can go in and fill out the form right away. You can also ask questions like, when are my company holidays? How much PTO do I have left? And then it can even say, well, would you like to request PTO? And move forward with a PTO policy. So at this time, I'd like to hand it back to Chris, who's going to fill us out to the end.
Oh, Chris, I
Chris,
think you're
you're
just on
muted.
mute.
Yep.
Apologize. So
No
getting
worries.
started, yeah, thank you for that. Getting started, common questions everybody has. I think that one of the things, this is a bit of an eye chart, but it's just important to note that here at Valorem Reply, we can help you on any aspect of your journey, from the beginning to the middle to the end of the process. Certainly, we'd like to help you from the beginning stages to get you implemented and started. But if you're in the middle of the process, if you're having challenges at the end, we don't want it to be a blocker for you to engage with us. We've had many customers where we've started at different cycles of their implementation. So just important to note that we can be involved at any step of the process or build in any kind of consulting services, no matter where you are in the process. Call to action. We talked a lot about security, just a little bit about threat detection. You want to determine whether you have highly sensitive protection that you need to address. That's certainly done first, and then you want to address your sensitive protection people, and then you certainly want to have your baseline protection at a minimal for most teams. And just a couple of our successes. We've done this for large petrochemical companies. We had a great implementation with a large one with 3,800 employees. I just got off some of the training within these groups, and we had 15 U.S. regions through training road shows. But I think the really important key here is the adoption rate of almost 95%. So we've engaged with oil and gas companies. We're engaging with more of them as we speak. And we're excited to continue down the road with that process. Don't know if we have any Q&A at this point, but I do want to thank you for attending today. We've enjoyed presenting to you. If you need to get in touch with any of us, I'd be your contact from the OG&E space. Naheem and Annie and Bill are certainly available as well. We encourage you to use the QR code to explore different events that we may have coming up. We're kind of moving at a fast and furious pace as far as Copilot goes, and we're excited to present to you today. So with that, I'll close it and say thank you again. We appreciate it today.